This service is about the spring equinox, which happened last Tuesday. And I'm going to start with a disclaimer. I do realize that I am being Northern Hemisphere centric. In the Southern Hemisphere, where about 12 or 13% of the world's population lives, last Tuesday was the fall equinox. But we are here in the Northern Hemisphere, along with 87 or 88% of our fellow Earthlings. So we're talking about spring. If you read the weekly update, you will know that a group of us did, in fact, have a spring equinox ritual here last Tuesday night, and it was a lot of fun. I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about that event and how the seasons and the turning of the year are celebrated by a small group here at CVUU and how that fits into my own spirituality. And then I'll talk about how some other people in other parts of the world celebrate the spring equinox. For many years, there's been a small group of what might loosely be called pagans among this congregation. The group has gone by different names over the years: earth-based spirituality or deep ecology, and there are probably some others that I'm forgetting. The group is more active at some times and less active at others, depending on who's around and who's willing to put time and energy into it. It seems like every few years we're like, let's get this going again. And then it goes for a while and then it fizzles off. But right now we're in a let's get this going again phase. So that's fun. You may be asking yourself, what is a pagan? And that's a very good question. Which has a lot of answers. Historically, the word has usually meant someone who follows a polytheistic religion, worships many gods, or more specifically, someone who is not a follower of one of the three big Abrahamic religions, which are monotheistic, which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The word pagan is related to other words that mean someone from the country, and it has implications of being rustic or backward or unenlightened. As it was first used by the early Christians, it was used to distinguish by the early Christians to distinguish themselves from those people. But beginning in the 20th century, though, there's been a movement of neo-pagans who wanted to reclaim the term as a positive thing and to explore various religious practices that had been crowded out by Christianity over the years, especially in Europe. These people are generally called neo-pagans, and their focus can be on basically any gods from any pantheon. Like I said, it was mostly at first focusing on the things that have been crowded out by Christianity in Europe, but there are neo-pagans who are into the Norse gods or the Celtic gods or the ancient Egyptian or Native American or African gods. And in true UU fashion, you can also be a pagan without any gods at all. And that would be me. If I'm asked to describe what I am religiously, I usually say I'm an atheist with pagan tendencies, which means that I don't do gods as such. I'm very happy to hear about them, but if you tell me about your god or gods, I will put it through a filter of metaphor and folklore and say, okay, it means something symbolic, but I guess I don't think of God as actual fact. It's just a way of explaining something. I don't do God. I don't believe in God or gods exactly, but I do believe that sacredness exists. And if there's anything that should be worshipped, it is the earth and life on earth. And since I've always lived in either the northeastern US or the Midwest, places that have well-defined seasons, honoring the cycle of the seasons makes a lot of sense to me. And that's what the pagan group here tends to do. We tend to hold ceremonies around something that Wiccans call the Wheel of the Year. Wicca if you're not up on this stuff, is a specific subset of neo-paganism that was developed in England in the first half of the 20th century. It incorporates a lot of Celtic mythology. The wheel of the year has 8 spokes. There are the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes, and then there are what are called the cross quarters, which are in between each solstice and equinox. And those are more or less Halloween, Groundhog Day, May Day, and Lammas, which is the 1st of August. The other 3 have Gaelic names too, but I won't go into that right now. Some say that the cross quarters, the ones in between the solstices and equinox, are the most important. In practice, here at CVUU, we celebrate whichever ones we get around to. Heather is looking at me and saying, yes, that's very true. So if you're wondering what happens at one of these rituals, we generally have a pattern that we follow, and although we diverge from it from time to time, and it's generally based on Wiccan practice. Someone sets up an altar in the middle of the room and we sit in a circle around it. We do what's called casting the circle, which is by calling in the spirits of the 4 directions. And each direction is associated with a particular season, a time of day, a color, one of the 4 elements, which earth, water, fire, and air, and so forth. And we call in the spirits and light a candle for each direction. During the dark times of the year, which would be Halloween or Samhain, winter solstice or Yule, and Groundhog Day or Imbolc or St. Bridget's Day, if you will. We tend to find excuses to light more candles than that. During the bright and warm times of the year, we sometimes do ritual outside if we can. Once we've cast the circle, we have some music, a reading. Sometimes we do a little handicraft work. Sometimes there's a guided meditation. Sometimes all of the above. And sometimes a little time for reflection and sharing what we've, thought about or discovered during the ritual. And then we thank the spirits and release them, and we're done. We will be doing a May Day ritual, but it's going to be a bit after the actual May Day because of some schedule conflicts. Heather and Floralyn may not have heard this yet because they weren't here last Tuesday. That's going to be Monday, May 6th at 6:30 p.m. here. Anyone is welcome. If you can't remember that from now until then, it will be in the weekly update. Before I leave the subject of neo-paganism, I wanted to mention just one other thing. I chose that second E.E. Cummings poem, not only because it's about spring, but I wonder if you noticed that the little lame balloon man in the first stanza, by the final stanza of the poem, he's the goat-footed balloon man. Now, who else do we know who's goat-footed? Anyone? Pan, the Greek god Pan, who, according to Wikipedia, which is my favorite source of wide and shallow knowledge, Wikipedia says about Pan that in ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pan is the god of the wild, shepherds and flocks, rustic music, and improvisation. He has the hindquarters, legs, and horns of a goat. He is also recognized as the god of fields, groves, wooded glens, and often affiliated with sex. And because of this, Pan is connected to fertility and the season of spring. And Wikipedia goes on to say that in the 18th and 19th centuries, Pan became a significant figure in the Romantic movement of Western Europe and also in the 20th century neo-pagan movement. Now, if you look into actual ancient Greek rituals around spring, they were more likely to be focused on Dionysus, with lots of drinking and dancing, or else they would involve reenactments of the story of Demeter and Persephone, which I won't go into right now. But neo-pagans are nothing if not eclectic, and there are a lot of solo practitioners who do their own thing. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody somewhere was building an altar and invoking the spirit of Pan last Tuesday. But now I wanted to talk a little bit about some other ways that the spring equinox is celebrated around the world. And I picked a few places that are not in Europe, because in Europe, things get very muddy, because as Christianity spread in Europe in various places, it would sort of try to absorb some of the previous religious practices that were there. And a lot of the rituals that might have once been associated with spring sort of got glommed onto Easter. And I'm not going to talk about that because that's too big a subject for today. But a lot of, I'm always fascinated by how many customs that are associated with some supposedly Christian holidays can actually be traced back to pre-Christian practices. And that's true of Easter. A lot of Easter things are spring rites. It's very true of Christmas. A lot of our Christmas customs are well, sort of pre-Christian holdovers. But anyway, in Japan, Vernal Equinox Day is a federal holiday. It's called Shunbun no Hi. Excuse my Japanese pronunciation. And traditionally, it was in the Shinto religion, it was a day that Japanese people would visit loved ones' grave sites and pay homage to their ancestors. It was also a time to renew your life by cleaning your home. Spring cleaning is a popular thing. And perhaps making life changes, like taking up a new hobby or starting a new project. Nowadays, since it is a federal holiday, most people have the day off work. Many will visit their families and spend time outdoors enjoying nature. Shunbun no Hi sometimes coincides with the blooming of the cherry trees, which is also a big event in Japan. And there are still people who visit their loved ones' grave sites on the holiday to clear away debris and leave offerings of food or fresh cut flowers. It's also a special holiday for farmers and gardeners, and it's a day to pray for good luck and fortune for the crops as they may grow in the upcoming season. That makes a lot of sense because spring is when you're planting, and it fits in. But from my American perspective, visiting your ancestors' graves is not an activity that I would associate with spring, but who am I to say? Moving to Central America, there are a number of pyramids in Mexico that are aligned with the sun and with the solstices and equinoxes, and those are popular places to go and observe the effects of sun and shadow on the date of the spring equinox. At Teotihuacan, people often dress in white with a red scarf or sash. The popular thing to do is get there early in the morning and climb the pyramid of the sun and stand at the top and absorb the energy of the sun. And it's hard to know, at least from the superficial amount of reading I did about this, how many people really consider this a religious observance and how many are just being tourists. But when you think about it, a lot of the people who live there are descendants of the people who actually built those pyramids and used them for ritual purposes. There's also at Chichen Itza, there's an effect that happens on the equinoxes where the shadows on the pyramid form what people think looks like the form of the feathered serpent moving down the pyramid. And if I were more pre-planned, I would have slides, but I don't. I've been busy. So the final one that I wanted to talk about is Nowruz, and I talked about that a little bit in the children's story. It is the Persian or Iranian New Year, and it falls on the spring equinox. It's also celebrated or has been celebrated in the past in lots of parts of Central Asia, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, and in Turkey. It's a preparation for the holiday, starts many days beforehand, and it involves, again, cleaning the house, buying new clothes, visiting your family, preparing special foods. And on the actual evening of the solstice, there's a special meal, as this happens especially in Iran, a special meal called a haftsin, which means 7 S's. And there are 7 special symbolic foods that all begin with the letter S that you eat at this. And I did not look up the pronunciations on this, but there is sabze, which is a sprout or grass that symbolizes renewal. Senjed, which is sweet dried fruit, symbolizing love. Sib, or apples, symbolizing health and beauty. Seer, or garlic, symbolizing medicine and self-care. Samanu, which is a kind of pudding, and it symbolizes wealth and fertility. Serke, which is vinegar, symbolizing wisdom and patience. And sumac, which in this context is a sour red berry spice, and it's red like the new sunrise. And the Haftzin table is very fancily decorated. It may have other things like that have various symbolic meanings, like a mirror, candles, painted eggs. That sounds kind of familiar. A bowl of water, goldfish, coins, hyacinth flowers, and you may have a book of wisdom on your table. And since Nowruz is considered today to be a non-religious holiday, it has its roots in Zoroastrianism, which is a very old religion. I think it's like the first monotheistic religion that we really know about. But anyway, Nowruz today is considered a non-religious holiday. So your book of wisdom could be a Quran, it could be a Bible, it could be a Zoroastrian text, or it could be just a book of poetry. But you know, you have wisdom on your table as well. And as I was saying in the children's story, I first heard about that here when my kids were in RE class and they had a curriculum that was about different world religions. They were learning about Nowruz, and they came out with little bowls of grass seeds that were sprouting. In reading more about it for this service, it kind of strikes me that it's probably in a lot of ways very similar to Christmas in the West, in that it's a big deal holiday that you prepare a lot in advance, and you have a lot of little parts of the celebration. There are certain things you do on certain days. But I like the idea of celebrating spring as the beginning of the year, because spring is a time of beginnings in a lot of ways. And it makes more sense to have the year start in spring than the way we do it in the dead of winter. But anyway, so here we are, a few days past the spring equinox, with a winter weather advisory in effect. But so I'd like to wish you a happy new year and happy new beginnings.